It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Feedback Friday. And first bit of Feedback Friday is that people liked the kind of soothing RimWorld background music in the videos. So I will keep that in mind. I will take that into account, that you guys kind of like the background music. It helps you focus as long as I assume it's instrumental and sort of that chill. So I will look for that music and I will try that. Good bit of feedback right there. See, these are the sorts of things that I can easily accommodate, which is awesome when they do that. But the RimWorld videos got a lot of attention. The Hero Boy one, not so much because it's a smaller game. So I want to show you guys more of that because one of the most uniquely terrifying sequences I have ever played in a video game is in Hero Boy. So I want to show you guys this while I talk. Someone suggested with the RimWorld stuff that I do videos that are just kind of quick and dismiss a topic with apathy when it really, really deserves it. They seem to really like that, so I will keep that in mind. I think that is actually a pretty good suggestion. It's pretty funny to just point out when something doesn't deserve a lot of thinking, as well as when things do. So that was a bit of feedback from the RimWorld video. From Hero Boy, yes, somebody asked, is it gamepad supported? Yes, the game is partially gamepad supported. The gameplay you're seeing right here is played on gamepad. I actually found it easier on my hands. The keyboard configuration was brutalizing me. It was actually causing me pain to play for more than 20 minutes at a time. So I switched to gamepad and it looks fine. You have to go back to keyboard for menu navigation and stuff like that, but that's it. Now I want to jump over to the comment I made about Hillary Clinton's loss, and I think it's the end of third wave feminism, the beginning of the end, at least. And that's based on historical trends and the age of the movement and a bunch of other things. But a lot of people were like, I hope you're right, but I don't think so. Or no, it'll never end. It'll just get more regressive and everything like that. I want to be clear about saying something's ending. It doesn't mean that feminist work is going to end. It means that a particular groundswell period in history ends, something that has defined edges. And I think it's time. I think it's time to move past the gender as class-based approach, because what's interesting about that is that wasn't what third wave was supposed to be. Third wave was supposed to be a more individualized approach to feminism, and it regressed. And like I said, I believe it regressed because feminism, as a movement, has not quite shaken off the Marxist influences that I believe are unhelpful because, as I said, gender is not a class, race is not a class, gender is gender, race is race, class is class, economic class. And any student of the history of things, and yes, this is where it starts to get messed up, and this is the part I'm talking about. Oh my God, killer clowns, freaking terrifying. This completely unnerved me. And then the freaky little monkeys, enjoy. This is horrifying. Even though it's like noodly little graphics, oh my God, I was so freaked out. So as I was saying, the any student of feminist history knows that it's not exactly that feminism is Marxist. It's that a lot of the first wave and second wave feminists were Marxists. Some of them were, people with literature degrees and things like that. But a lot of them were associated with the labor movement because they were either essentially rich women living in gilded cages, or they were working class people. And that's where things like syndicalism and workers' rights and all that stuff sort of came into it. And there was a schism trying to keep everyone happy in that in the first wave, the working classes didn't care particularly about the vote. And this is the interesting thing about defining first wave feminism as suffrage, reductively, because a lot of the working class women who joined up with the movement back when there actually were organizations, you could actually, see edges that way. But a lot of them really didn't care about voting franchise because the men in their lives couldn't even vote. You had to be a property owner that owned property of more than a certain value to vote in England back then. So they didn't care overly much about voting rights. They cared about workplace conditions and being able to keep the money they made. And it's crazy to study kind of the working conditions because women were put into a lot of fine detail work, garment work, and painting, detail painting and things like that. And they were exposed to high concentrations in some factories of like radium and mercury and things like that. It was horrendous. Like, it was horrendous. And so there's always been a really destructive class divide in feminism. In the second wave, it was the fact that black women had to choose between civil rights and women's rights, and so second wave feminism became a very white movement. Now, I would maintain that one of the things that happened, and this started in the third wave, but I think that this is a fourth wave in terms of really opening up I think we need a form of mosaic feminism instead of the intersectional feminism that we're dealing with now. I think intersectionalism is a great start, but it doesn't quite solve the issues we're struggling with right now, simply because the idea of, yes, every individual, and this is scary too, watch what happens when you get battle damage on that crazy psycho elephant. Freaked me out. But intersectionality is great. The idea that every person's experience is an intersection of race, gender, class, and all that good stuff. But I think we need a more mosaic approach or prismatic approach in the idea that, a lot of people, not just women, but people, are different things at different times. And that's very real. And we need to be more open to being accepting of other people's experiences. And we can't do that when we continue to look at gender as this class-based structure, because class, the thing that's great about class is that you can set economic policies that lift up large amounts of people based on income bracket. When you start treating gender as a class, you start going, okay, this is going to be good for women. And that things go so wrong there, because what it starts doing is, unlike economic class policies that, okay, if you lift people out of poverty, that gives them more options. If you give the middle class upward mobility, it encourages achievement and it encourages innovation because, people want their kids to do better than they are, and so on and so forth. So you can treat class as a class, but the thing about gender is a collection of attitudes and behaviors. And so when you start trying to set attitudinal policy, that's when you get this thought police type thing, which is why I'm so big on Judith Butler and her gender performativity theory and the idea that Kitten Avalanche, what the heck just happened? Okay, so I cannot find anything that fell over. Something just spooked the kittens so hard that they all ran at the same time, and you guys heard how loud it is. Normally I cut that stuff out, But that was so funny, I decided to leave it in. So give me a minute to get myself together, and then we'll get back to talking about gender performance. But oh Lord, that was funny. Okay, so the whole thing about there's a critical mass where criticism becomes repression. It becomes suppression of dissent through shame, obviously. And to me, the book that you should read to understand shame are the works of Franz Kafka. I got into Kafka in high school. And between Metamorphosis and The Trial, and, you know, those are the two that really, I think, deal with the whole concept of shame as social control. And it really profoundly influenced my idea of it, because basically what, you know, the metaphor in Kafka's stories, especially The Trial, is that if you can shame a person significantly enough, if you can put them through enough psychological pressure, you don't have to punish them, they'll do it themselves. And they'll accept the punishment gladly because they know they did something wrong, even if they don't actually know what it is. And that is certainly what we've been getting into with the regressive left, the Dorksiders, whatever you want to call it. The Dorksiders are a subsection of the regressive left. But this idea that you can shame a person into behavioral modification is just, it's just junk, isn't it? I mean, anybody who knows anything about psychology or counseling knows you can't force someone to modify behavior. It is a process. And all shaming does is makes people not speak. They still have the thought, but they either can't put it into words or they won't put it into words. And this is a very, you know, the idea of language as a thought control is a very Marxist concept. I mean, Orwell explored this in, you know, 1984, among other things, double plus on good and all that stuff. But I personally believe, and I remember reading Orwell again in high school. I went through this whole massive dystopian phase when I was in high school. I remember in high school thinking, but there are plenty of concepts that I had this idea of, even if I didn't know the words for it. And no one could take away that thought from me. Through education, I learned the words to express it, but I always had the thought. And this is where we get into this issue of class when we're dealing with these, you know, social justice issues. Right now, the paradigm is that there's a relatively small group of people scolding the world through words that the rest of the world does not understand. And this is ridiculous, completely counterproductive. It just breeds resentment instead of actually creating lasting changes. When hardworking people, and I include students in that, start being told you're bad because you used a word choice, they rebel against that, because it's, to most thinking people, an inherently stupid concept. And that's harsh language, but that's how people feel about it. And a more productive way to go at it is to explain to somebody, and this is assuming they give a rat's ass. If they don't, you know, no amount of talking to them in the world is going to change anything. You'll have to escalate it or just end the conversation. But if you explain to a person the impact of their choice of words, you know, then it's much more lasting. The impact lasts. They don't just shut up because somebody's mad. they actually understand why they should make that correction. When you actually have a conversation with somebody and you learn their story about that journey, it means a lot more than somebody screaming at you on the internet, calling you a transphobe because it was probably accidental the first time you did it. I've seen you guys deliberately misgender people after the fact, and while I don't agree with that behavior, I understand the frustration. And that's exactly what I'm getting at. If somebody explains to you that, look, it's painful for me when you use the wrong gender pronoun because it feels like an insult. Like, let's face it, and you're constantly reminding a person that they were born in the wrong body. As difficult as it is, anybody who's ever had to change pronouns because somebody transitioned knows it really takes a while to remember that for some odd reason, it's always harder for me when it's female to male instead of male to female. I don't know why. That's just, I slip and go she when I should say he, as opposed to the other way around. But you know, you're like, and you keep making mistakes, until you get it. If you're around a person who is transgender long enough, eventually it becomes normal to refer to them by the gender that they feel more comfortable identifying with. It just becomes second nature. That person in your mind becomes a he instead of a she to you, or vice versa. Or they, for that. It's just retraining your mind to make that association. But on the other hand, that person you're doing that for can never make that progression. It always feels unnatural to do these things. Trust me, as someone who finds a lot of allegedly female behaviors incredibly unnatural, you know, that coyness, that giggly thing, that whole deal, not me. I used to joke all the time that I was bad at being a girl. I realized I need to stop doing that because that's getting trapped by the traditional definition of what it means to be female. But we all have our own journeys. And that's why this idea of transphobic, sexist, all this stuff, it's fine to explain to somebody why a behavior is a problem, but to label somebody as a whole, a certain thing, that won't get you very far, whether it's true or not. And labeling a behavior with a buzzword is equally not useful, because then somebody gets all flustered and defensive and they don't listen to what you say. And so on that note, I want to address a comment that somebody left, because I thought it was actually a pretty good comment. We'll do this, and then we'll do the question for the week, and then we're good. It is a comment about general attitudes. I'm going to address this comment kind of backwards, because I'm going to do the second part first that they asked. First of all, they asked me, they questioned whether I shifted on women as a class. I said dual approach of class and gender, like the dual nature of light. Now I'm saying no, gender is gender, not a class. That's a context thing. And I'm only going to get into this because the person asked. But historically, there have been strides when it comes to gender by treating it as a class. Title IX is a classic example. Voting franchise has been a classic example. But in those cases, it was an unnatural denial of rights based on a sort of artificial differentiation. So it was actually correcting a wrong, not, accommodating women as a class by giving women the ability to do things that men can do. The more we do that, the more we, diminish the demarcation of, things that happen to all women versus all men. And that is still a serious issue in certain parts of the world. The whole thing about, women in Saudi Arabia couldn't drive, or, there's certain things that are artificially separating the genders in terms of rights or freedoms. And those en masse have to be corrected. Now, the problem is that sort of second wave approach of women as class, for those purposes, we're beyond that now. We're dealing with much more nuanced differentiation, which is still important, but not... The class-based approach doesn't work that way. So it's not really it's a pivot, yes, but it's not really a contrast. It's that historically it's that way now. Like, I'm talking about how it's been. Now I'm talking about how I think we need to approach it going forward. So I appreciate the ability to clarify that, because it's a solid point. Yes, I did talk about that in a different way back then, and I stand by that. I stand by it's been sort of this weird dual thing. What I'm saying is I want to start thinking now about gender as gender and class as class, as opposed to the way it's been done historically. Cool. Okay, let's move on to the second part of this comment. And some sort of tips for dealing, and I thought this was really good, so I thought I'd read this comment because it's really good. It's like, 1, the fact that a movement has bad apples should not be instant dismissal of the movement. Carefully engage and don't misrepresent, and try to pick up the best arguments so you satisfy the reasonable people, and keep at it even if it's very difficult and might take a long time. They might be wrong about what they say, but understanding the root of what happens without demonizing helps. That's what I was just talking about. 2, don't hide the bad stuff about the movement. That's important too, both for self-reflection of the movement and because as the opponents of the movement will focus on the hiding. Pretending that the movement is full of angels does more harm than good too. Can't agree more. 3, try to look outside your shell, like your sources and people from your circles, to see if your experience is indicative of the movement as a whole matches your perspective. If not, try to figure out why your description might be wrong. Find something that fits better. Yes, it's important to look outside the echo chamber from time to time. 4, if you don't understand why people would rather focus on some different part of their life than what you're interested in, it may be good to see whether you would focus on that if you're in that kind of environment. For example, if you don't know why so many people would rather focus on understanding complexities of football than complexities of politics, then you're disconnected from the daily lives of way too many people, and your ideas about politics are likely to get a severe pushback if they would adversely affect those people. And that's sort of my reaction to the whole RimWorld thing. So agree as well. 5, don't worry, being wrong is being wrong, but since you're in a democracy, compromise can take priority over most principles, regardless of how important they seem. This is true. And 6, don't worry about you pushing back if the actual core idea or motivations end up crystallizing into something awful. It's okay to fight bad core ideas, whether it's wholesale like racism, sexism, with definition pending, of course, or certain aspects of modern feminism, which are addressing, or dare I say, harmful ideas of some religions, which need some humanistic heresy injected into them in order to not self-destruct and take others along. I very much agree with the idea of every movement having their satanic verses, to draw on Solomon, sorry. I think it's very important to embrace the iconoclasts of a movement and embrace dissenting opinions, because it does make it stronger. It's quality assurance for a political affiliation. And that, I know that they're like, the infighting, don't let people see it, all that stuff. No. Respectful dissent within a movement is exceptionally important. And it's important to be able to disagree without having things descend into outright war. I have never been a person who just accepts things blindly. And I think that's very important, because the great thing about testing something is at the end you may believe it even more strongly. And that's true for anything. And this is why I constantly push back against name calling and accusations without any sort of, corroboration evidence is difficult sometimes, but, you know, make your case, right? And instant dismissals and, you know, you're being a pro-victim, you're white knighting, you're hand-waving, all this stuff. None of this is useful. None of this is productive. And I very much want an environment, and I chose to focus on gaming specifically because we are a bunch of people who don't fit in other places. And so we have to make this community fit for people who don't fit in. The feedback you guys have given and the fact that, you know, it was a difficult week for a lot of people, various reasons. A lot of people are dealing with social circles that are completely melting down right now. And it's a testament to you guys that you've kind of come here and you've risen above that and you've been better than that. And I've seen a lot of people performing acts of kindness and being complimentary and giving praise now. And it's been good to see because it really separates the people who in difficult times are better and the people who succumb to it. And so that sort of leads me to the next question. I normally just kind of pick topics I think you guys are interested in. But is there anything in particular moving forward that you are interested in? Is there any sort of point in history or particular concept or something like that that you'd like to see? I am, like I said, I am going to do this, you know, inclusion versus free speech debate with the whole gender pronouns thing that's going on in Canada. I'm going to address that next week. But is there any other topic you guys would like me to address that, you know, is sort of of consideration for you? Are you curious? Are you interested? Are you confused by something? Let me know and have a very good weekend. Just do something fun. Go play something fun. I recommend Hero Boy and RimWorld this week. Both of them kind of have bugs, but it's because they're sort of new, but they're not, you know, game-breaking catastrophic bugs. The games are fun. The games are fun, and they're heartwarming and funny, and, you know, what more can you ask? Have a good weekend, guys.